Hello and welcome back to another step of self-discovery. I'm Juhli Leman and I'm glad you're with me again as we start a new episode, which is number 4. It is about managing our triggers and suppressed anger. Now, in our last episode, we explored how to manage emotions in ways that led us toward a more positive state of ease. We talked about how emotional intelligence gives us the tools to handle challenges and to help our friends and loved ones when emotions keep running high. And today we are going deeper into one of the more difficult and most uncomfortable areas of emotional management. It is a subject that is needing much patience from us to fully grasp what is demanded from us, to be able to master it well. Why does suppressed anger matter? Most of us struggle with emotions, not because we feel them, but more because we don't let them flow naturally. We push them away down into the body, hoping they will go away. But suppressed anger does not disappear. It lingers in our body, just waiting for the right moment to resurface again. When it does, it may come very suddenly and will surprise us. That is why understanding triggers is so important. Now we need to explore what exactly is a trigger. A trigger is an automatic emotional reaction. It is something that reminds our mind, subconsciously though, of a past hurt or unresolved conflict. For example, let's say someone once criticized us harshly at work. We may feel very humiliated, but instead of addressing it, we buried the feeling. Later, when someone even slightly questions our work, that old wound is reopening. We may find ourselves reacting much more than the situation deserves then. So now we realize a trigger is not just what is happening right now, it is about what the current moment reminds us about, and it's moments from the past. Now, how do triggers affect us? When we don't recognize our triggers, we end up hurting ourselves. Sometimes we lash out at others. That can easily happen, but often the real damage happens internally. The body tenses and the mind races, and suddenly we are caught up in the same loop again and again. So now, to go back to our before mentioned fight or flight response, which we have been speaking about, we may now be more familiar with it because it is that rush of adrenaline when we feel threatened. Triggers will activate the same response every time, even when the threat is not real. For example, we may have performance anxiety before speaking in public, which can happen. It often comes from a deep-rooted fear of being judged, even if no danger exists, actually. So to be able to break free from these patterns, we need to notice our reactions in real time. When working on breaking our habits, we now need to be vigilant and keep observing ourselves, because awareness is necessary. If we feel that the rush is coming up again, we can notice the reactions in our body first. It can be a tightening in the chest and in the stomach area, and also a surge of heat maybe, and then there's an impulse. That one can easily make us maybe snap at someone, or similarly as we do our outbreaks. Now, where is this coming from? We can ask ourselves, how can we find a way to correct these destructive patterns? We may realize that it will demand that we pause. Then the pause creates space between the trigger and the reaction. The only choice available is to use this break to escape the unrelenting pattern. What can we do now is simply reframe our thinking. We can now resort to a powerful technique. When reframing our thinking, it will change our response. Our minds love patterns. If we labeled our past experience as threatening or humiliating, we will continue to interpret new situations the same way. But reframing allows us to create a complete new perspective. For instance, instead of thinking, "Oh, they are criticizing me again, I must not be good enough," or something like that, we should try to shift to a different thought, which may be, "Oh, this is about my work, not about me as the person. And now I should use this to just grow myself." So this is a much better response. To learn to process this new technique will take some time though, and much practice. Our minds will fall back again and again into its old way, but over time it will reduce the force of reactiveness and make it easier to finally rid ourselves of our old menacing routine. There are more ways to practice stopping our old patterns. When we were learning about our thoughts in the beginning of our first segment, we learned about some techniques on how to stop some of our rolling thought patterns we may have. And there's a breathing technique we could use that will break an escaping thought pattern. It also may be helping with the devastating trigger problem. At the end of the course, some breathing techniques will be provided and available for us to use. When we keep holding the breath or inhale before we utter any kind of patterned response, it will also help us pause. Also, when we inhale, it will stop the familiarity and create the break we would need. To find further ways to help our problem is by watching ourselves more to notice the different possibilities when our triggers may show up. Sometimes they can show up in so many different ways. For instance, in bad traffic situations or at any other irritating situations. For instance, when our patient is being much tested. To go back to our breathing, a quick simple exercise we can try is breathe in deeply, hold that breath for a second, and as you exhale, imagine releasing not just the breath, but the tension also behind it. That tiny act of awareness and release interrupts the automatic pattern. Over time, we can notice that we are less reactive and much more in control. These reactions themselves are usually anger, sadness, or anxiety, which are the mind and body's use for immediate coping. Any of the reactions showing up are always directed against ourselves, even if we may react towards other people. When we keep up the practice of reacting, we will keep up hurting ourselves and to some devastating results. If the reactions remain unmanaged, they will create a self-perpetuating cycle that can only get worse over time. It will be hard to keep relationships, and many more ailments can eventually show up because these reactions are very hurtful to us and bothersome to our whole being. Before we are closing, as we will now end our segments that are all about our emotions, it is good to sum up what we know about emotions now. We realized that we must deal with many kinds of different emotions, some of which are more destructive for ourselves than others. We now know that a trigger activates an emotional memory, which then drives a reaction. It is good to think back when suddenly something upset us. But it is already very upsetting to us not to be aware of many of the past incidents that happened to us. So when we cannot recall them anymore, we need to deal with the resulting reactions appropriately. We created for us more difficulties to manage the reactions when they come up at a later time. And it is always the anger we then need to deal with, which is a very damaging emotion. Being caught up with the resulting anger is so much more hurting to ourselves. And something is deeply missing. As we usually crave love, we are caught up in a very disappointing scenario. We must now be able to reduce the hurt we have been giving us ourselves. Learning to master the new technique will require much of our time and energy. Our mind may fall back into its old ways sometimes, and it will need much more practice to keep up our new techniques. But keeping up our practice will deliver us to more satisfying and happier mindsets. We will be able to bring ourselves to a very different consciousness because we gain so much more awareness when getting away from our unconscious habits. They are so devastating to us. We can rise from these hard-to-manage negative mindsets. As a closing thought, we again need to remember to be nice to ourselves and keep practicing our programs we have set for ourselves and keep reflecting to be able to reach into our inner world. Now, looking ahead, our next episode will be about recognizing our voices and learning about and protecting our inner child. In summary, how we can love ourselves better and stop hurting ourselves. Thank you for listening and see you soon. It's Juhli.